Hello, I'm Anat from the Open University of Israel. The question of how to meaningfully study whole national web domains has troubled me for many years. I wrote my PhD dissertation on the emergence of the Palestinian web as a border-making technology and studied the development of this national web over time. Already then, I was bothered by questions of commensurability of one national domain to another. Can we really understand a national web without systematic comparison to other national webs? Can one compare the number of hosts, for example, in one national domain to another, the locations of its servers, the distribution of website types or MIME types? Is it possible at all to compare national domains that vary in size without contextualizing the economic, cultural, and political contexts that may explain differences between national webs? As a postdoc researcher, I was part of a team that built information retrieval tools on top of the Dutch Web Archive. There, the question of commensurability took another shape. The Dutch Web Archive is curated. How can it then be compared to other national webs, such as those in France, the UK, in Denmark, which use domain harvesting? In the past years, I've also characterized the historical Yugoslav web and the Israeli Web Archive. Recent technological developments and tools allow more and more researchers to engage with national webs and do pioneering work, such as the work done in the UK, in France, in Canada, and in Denmark. We are now able to characterize national webs better than before. But what kind of historiographies can we do with these characterizations? So this short contribution is not a presentation of work that has already been done on national domains, and it's also not a presentation of work in progress. Instead, I'd like to use the opportunity to raise theoretical questions on what it is that we are comparing and what is the contribution of comparison to historiographical web research. These are just first thoughts and not a fully developed research program, but I'd be interested in getting your feedback on these questions. As I just mentioned, I work with several national web archives and use computational methods to characterize them. But the more I dug into the attempt to characterize a national web, the more frustrated I became. Crucially, the technical characteristics of national domains are not always helpful in asking meaningful historical questions about the development of a national web. So to me, the idea to compare national webs beyond technical characteristics remained intriguing. Even if we solve technical questions of commensurability, for example, by contextualizing the differences in archiving methods, techniques, frequencies, and depths, or by establishing benchmarks for comparison, I'm not sure we know what to do with them and how to engage with them in meaningful ways for comparative historical research. In many cases, the computational characterization of national web archives raises questions that could not be answered because there wasn't enough context or metadata to explain the witnessed phenomena. For example, in the case of the Israeli Web Archive, we saw that the domain harvest contained more URLs from domains outside of the .il domain than domains in the .il domain, even though the harvest was designed to capture the .il domain. Before engaging in historical questions, one has to find answers to these challenging technical problems. I would like to propose that the comparative dimension should be cultural rather than technical. Or to be more precise, that the comparison of the technical will be used to support cultural dimensions for comparison. Niels Berger argues that the study of the archive web requires developing web philology skills. Similarly, I argue that before engaging in comparing whole national domains and before engaging in the technical questions, we need to invest time in developing a theoretical framework for comparative history of web archives. Here I derive on epistemic and methodological principles portrayed by historians and ask what can be learned from comparative history for the development of a theoretical framework for comparing web archives. I draw here in particular on a question raised by Haupt and Kokke in their 2004 book titled Comparison and History, and I hope I pronounced the name correctly. They argue that for historians, who rely both on the principles of primary sources and on the need to understand change over time, the comparative approach is at odds with principles of historiography. They also argue that comparisons are theoretically challenging, as historians are constantly forced to reflect on their method. Although I think the web archiving community is used to reflecting on methods, what I'd like to propose is to begin formulating the types of historiographical approaches that we can undertake when comparing domains. The following are just preliminary thoughts on the approaches and questions that we can start asking. One of the first questions to be asked is, what are our units of analysis and approaches to historiography? Are we comparing nations, websites, archiving institutions, issues, and what are we asking about them? We can, for one, undertake a globalist cultural approach and compare national domains based on cultural, political, and economic dimensions. Alternatively, we can employ a transfer history approach to examine the interrelationships between two national webs or nations or web objects. Or perhaps put less emphasis on the national aspects and dive deeper into issues, phenomena, technological developments across national web archives. This is also known as the entangled history approach. In my view, reflection on the approaches, methods, epistemology of these choices should be the first step to undertake before addressing the technical issues of commensurability that would enable the comparison of entire national webs. This is a question I'm interested in pursuing in this group, and I look forward to our conversations on the topic. Thank you.